Hello and welcome to the Artist Way podcast, a new venture of Azaad Arts. Me and Jappy are super delighted to have our first artist, Terrie Samundra.
Welcome to our podcast, everybody. We are so delighted to be joined by Terrie Samundra. Terrie Samundra is a writer and director based in California. Samundra is the writer-director of the short films Gunjo, Ice Cream Wala and Short Tail Shun. Her debut feature, Gali Kuhi, was released on Netflix. Thank you so much for being a part of our very first podcast, Terrie.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining, Terrie. Let's begin with the beginning. So what moment was it that you realized you wanted to be a filmmaker now? This doesn't have to be film related. It could maybe be a story or something completely different.
I don't know the exact moment. It took me a really long time or what people would consider a long time. You know, there's all these kind of arbitrary goalposts of what you're supposed to do at what age. And when I was a kid, I remember, I loved theater and I loved going to films, and I used to go with my mom. In India, we used to go to the theater, and I think that part of it was to get out of the heat. Like sometimes we would just go, and it was like in the middle of the summer in Punjab or something, and it would 4-hour-long expedition, and she would bribe me with chocolate and gum and snacks and stuff. But I loved theater then, and then films, and then with my dad. We used to watch like old timey things like Charlie Chaplin and the Marx Brothers and Three Stooges, and it was just part of our life. And then my mother, she always told me stories. She was a writer. She is a writer, and I think that writing was just a really important part of our household. There was a time when we didn't have a TV. My parents, both they're avid journalists, or I'm sorry, they keep journals every day. They do journal writing, and so I grew up with the expectation of me also doing that. And then we read a lot when I was a kid. Like the reward would be, we can go and get a new book. And I think because they were both at the university, it was just, part of what we did in our home. I also loved books as a kid. I loved books. I was like that dorky kid. I volunteered at the bookmobile. There was this, this like roaming library on wheels that would come to our apartment complex once a week, and I would volunteer there. I don't know why. I think I thought the librarian liked me. And I think I got like first pick of whatever new books were out or something. So there was that. But I wasn't like it's not like I was like a goody two-shoes kid or anything like that. I always gravitated towards kind of misfits and artists and people kind of, subculture things. And then, out of high school and college, actually, I had a boyfriend that worked at the local independent video store. And so I just, devoured everything I could in there. Like at that time, I think it was the height of like Chinese independent cinema, Taiwanese cinema, Japanese cinema, lots of European stuff that was coming out. So I just watched everything I could get my hands on. And then in college, if there was like an elective, I would always just take the film class, the film theory class, which, some kids would take it because you can fall asleep in the back. It's like a lecture hall. But I think that's when things started to come together. And then also I did a lot of theater as a kid. I was actually a dorky theater actor kid, and I loved theater. I loved acting, just like those dorky thespian kids. So I think at some point it all kind of came together, and I started to experiment and play around, and and then I found myself starting to make short films after that.
Was there any particular thing about directing that really attracted you? Because I can see a lot of the writing influence, you know, especially because of your parents, you know, your childhood. Is there something specifically about directing that attracted you more than just being a writer and, you know, maybe not pursuing the acting kind of career, and you decided to, you know, be a filmmaker instead?
I think that I see things, stories, visually, and you know, I did a lot of, so I was writing a lot, and I did a lot of creative writing, and I realized that my creative writing was very visual based, and I think that it just started to make sense that I would move into directing and making films. And because I also love theater, and I absolutely adore actors, I think that acting is one of the most vulnerable art forms, because when you're an actor, you're so dependent on the work that's given to you, and you have to completely trust that process. And you're writing a very fine line of pure trust, and then also kind of going, okay, I'm going to let this go because I don't have full control of this. And of course, there's brilliant actors who write their own work and produce their own work and kind of are able to kind of take that, you know, ownership of their own career, which is wonderful. But I think my kind of reverence for acting and theater, and then storytelling mixed with visual cinematic language, just all came together. And I like the creator role. Like, even say, for example, like television, I mean, I love writers' rooms, but I really I like that shaping of the story, the cinema, the pacing, just all of it. And I don't mind helming the ship and having, like, you know, just multitasking and stuff. I think it actually feels like it just felt like a natural fit for me.
Something that me and Rupinder have noticed quite a lot in all your short films, and of course Gali Guhi as well, your films kind of I feel like deliberately, or maybe it's just the theme. The story, you know, is shown in the eyes of a child. You know, we have Gunju, Ice Cream Wala, Gali Gohi, and the short story of Shona as well. Is this something that you deliberately do, that you tell the story through the eyes of a child? And if so, why?
Yeah, I do think certainly for all of those, it is deliberate. You, the viewer, are, you know, experiencing through the POV of the character. I mean, each filmmaker chooses a different language, and my language is certainly that. I love, I think that I'm still very much, you know, growing up, still figuring out my place in the world as an adult. And I really like that space of curiosity and always seeing something with new eyes and fresh eyes. And I think that I always want to have that openness. And so I seek that in the films that I make. It's probably more subconscious than conscious, but definitely when I'm working with the cinematographer and the way in which we're shooting it, it has to be through the POV. And I personally am not interested in making work that's removed. So you know, I don't want to be so aware of a camera watching a character. I want to be with the character. And you know, we were able to achieve that with Kalikuhi, with the way that we built our shots. And then with Kunjo, it was with a lot of handheld camera work. And, you know, those were all first-time actors. Those are, you know, I generally work with first-time actors or people who are open to exploring and playing. And bringing their own acting style, and it's very, I think that the role of the director is to understand that each actor has their own style and to understand different methods and how to get what you're looking for, but also to meet the actor in a place where they're bringing their work to the table and their understanding of the character and story, or else it just halts everything and makes it really stale. And you're basically fighting for some sort of result instead of letting this kind of natural magic happen. And to go back to your question, yeah, and I think in that process, the curiosity and the POV of a child, which is, you know, I guess generally the characters that I write and I gravitate towards. But of course, like with the feature, I'm also interested in women who, you know, a lot of times we see like a very kind of specific age groups. And, you know, like with Shabanaji's character, I was so interested in exploring her experience. So even, you know, there are definitely scenes in there where we are in her POV as well.
So we were just wondering, what would you like to say to your younger self, if anything?
Oh my gosh. Well, I would say to my youngest self to stop I mean, see, but here's the thing. It's like a paradox. I feel like I wasted so much time. However, you have to trust that journey of all that quote unquote wasted time is actually a well of knowledge that you now draw from. You know, like everything that I would consider like a mishap or a mistake or something I did where I'm like, oh, I should have done that differently. That's actually insightful to character and story, because those are the characters and stories that I think audiences and all of us empathize with. Like, how boring to be like, I am this perfect person who made all these right decisions at the right time. Like, I would be like, I don't know who you are and I'm not interested. So, you know, luckily the field or whatever it is that I'm doing, you know, has a empathy and reverence for characters that are flawed and make mistakes. So I guess in that way, it's hard for me to go back and say like, I should have done this or I should have done that. I do think that it's really, really important to have some mentors and some guides. I think it's really important when you're younger to have some kind of cornerstones that, you know, if you feel like you've lost your way or you're questioning things or you're confused or whatever, you have some, and that's why, you know, I have so much respect for having like an elder or somebody who's your guide or your mentor. You know, to me, that's been my mom, that's been, you know, my Masi, Neelam. There's like certain people in my life that I think that's really important, especially for young women. And my God, in high school, to not care about dumb boys. God,
I agree with that one.
What a waste. What a waste of time. Oh my God. Like, why was my writing about that and not about something else that was more interesting?
Oh my God, we can so relate. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, like, last night I was actually thinking about this one situation. I was like, God, I was so distraught, like the world was ending, and it's humorous now.
It really is indeed. Thank you so much for that, Terrie. I also think when we're developing as an artist, we have a lot of self-doubt. I mean, me and Jappy constantly deal with this. So just hearing these words from you is really helpful for us. So thank you for that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that self-doubt is just so real, and it can be so brutal, and it can be really harmful. I mean, you know, I think that we're given mixed messages. There's messages to be like, especially, you know, in our culture, it's like to be humble, oh, you're so simple, you're so humble, you're so sincere. But with all of that, that can also become detrimental in that you don't believe in your own work, and you don't see your own unique voice and your own unique vision. You just have to find a place where you can tap into that and really allow yourself to express yourself and not compare yourself to other people, and what other people doing, like literally just shut off the world and stay super focused. And then, you know, when you're feeling kind of wobbly on that, have, you know, one or two at the most people who are the people that you go to, who just like help you just stay focused and on track with understanding that desire to express yourself and your unique story and voice is important, and it's needed.
I wanted to ask you about Gunjo. That's a short film that we really, really, really love, and it's so unique. Like, it's not something that I've never come across, like a story that is so unique, you know, based on, you know, children who, you know, are in Punjab. What actually inspired you to write the film?
So before I made the film, 2 years previous, I had been, you know, I went home and I was doing a lot of photography at the time. And I think I was there for maybe 2 or 3 months, you know, and in our family's home, it's my grandfather's village. And there were these two young girls that would come every day, and, you know, they would get flour and money. And I just started to talk to them and ask them questions. And they were just so fun and playful and interesting. And I one day was taking a walk, this very old temple that I used to go to as a child. It's this one that's now, it's like really overgrown. There's like old mango trees and jamun trees. It's like this beautiful place that I like to walk to. Their home, and these are refugees. These are Rajasthani refugees who've now been living there for quite some time. They've, you know, moved because of the drought and come to Punjab. And when I was walking, you know, I saw the girls, and then they kind of invited me to come and see where they live. And I just got to know them and like build like a really kind of, you know, sweet relationship with them, getting to know their families. And, you know, everybody was used to me doing photography, and my father had done the same thing. My father was a photographer, so it was just, you know, elders in the village remembered me as my father doing photography. And, you know, so I just, so anyways, I started to take photographs of these young girls. And then when I left, I was working on my thesis project, and I was planning to do my thesis on something else. And my mind just kept going back to these two girls. And also just, I wanted to go basically back to, you know, one of my home, and make a film there. And I knew that that was going to be difficult because in a lot of these programs, you're not supposed to travel, you know, you're supposed to keep things very minimal. But it was just something that I wanted to do. And I was like, well, if I don't do it now, when am I going to do it? And I don't want to just like make another short just to make it for the thesis. So then, you know, basically, I raised some funds, and I had my own kind of money through school, and we got just a very little amount of like financing and a grant. I got a grant through National Geographic. And then we went back and we just made a film that was, you know, we wrote a script, but we knew that it was just going to be basically a skeleton, because we were going to do it really verite guerrilla style. Like, so we got there, and you know, I asked the elders of the village, like, I want to do this project. Do I have your permission? Because I knew that was really important to ask for permission, and basically, you know, just say, do I have your okay to do this? Will you give me, you know, your blessings, basically? And then with that, my mother came and my Masi was there, and we did about 4 weeks of workshops. So, you know, the project was larger than just the short film. And most of the girls from the encampment, they don't go to school. There is a government school for them, but most of them don't go to it, or they don't go to it consistently. You know, they're expected to gather firewood and water and care for younger siblings, and they have a lot of responsibilities. They're, you know, part of a working household. So I had to go and ask their parents and elders to allow them to come and participate in the workshops. And the workshops were really fun. Like, we did theater, we did storytelling. They, you know, told me like all their own stories, their own dances. And it was the evolution of all of us, and what we built outside of the film was, you know, my favorite experience. We also, I think we took 3 or 4 cameras, so they all got to work together in groups to go outside and film. So, you know, I have all this footage. We actually could have made a feature film. We did make a cut of the film, which is about 50 minutes. I mean, there is like fantastic, beautiful footage, and also really heartbreaking stories. I mean, you know, there's so much stuff, and at the end of the day, you know, you can't put out a film that you, if you're going to make a short, you make it short. And luckily, you know, this was a long short. It was 25 minutes, and luckily it did really well. If it had been 10 or 12 minutes, it could have played at a lot more festivals. And I know that because I've been a film festival programmer, so I know how programming works. Like, a 25-minute film has to be, you're taking up the space of like an hour-and-a-half program. So you have to either be that cornerstone of that program and you build around it, or you don't program it, because you know, it doesn't allow you to program like 3 or 4 other films. So anyways, you know, the project was larger than just the short, and we built these beautiful relationships, and I'm still in touch with a lot of them. My mom's still in touch with a lot of the kids. And I mean, now many of them are young women who got married, have kids. And I knew that that was going to happen. I knew that that was going to happen because, you know, we were basically working with them right at the cusp of their coming of age. And because things happened so fast there, I mean, there was already stuff where one of the girls that we had cast, you know, she wasn't allowed after like a week or 2 to participate in the project. I had to really convince the parents that this wasn't, you know, they weren't going to be singing and dancing. There wasn't any romance. I mean, there's just so many factors, and the fact that their families trusted me to do this was really incredible. One of the girls, she got really sick. She got typhoid, and she passed away about 8 years ago, right after we made it. I mean, a lot has happened, but that whole experience was absolutely incredible. And it was all first-time actors. And you know, we wove in a lot of the story. For example, the cow that's been stepped on. So my aunt, she's not doing it anymore, but she would she was kind of caring for animals and cows that had been, you know, abandoned. And that was a baby that had been abandoned and had been stepped on. And so we were taking care of it, and then we happened to get it on camera. And then I wanted to put it in the film, and it's really brutal, but I also felt like it worked with the story of the 2 girls and the characters.
So our next question is, we are really actually interested that what made you actually want to write a film on female foeticide, like popularly known as Gorimar? Was there something particular that's happened that made you want to write a film on this? Because honestly, it's really rare that there's a film on this. I don't think I've ever come across a film like this.
You know, somebody told me about a film called Jalpari. The I think that means desert dolphin. Am I saying it right?
Jalpari.
I think it's maybe a South Indian film. I don't know. Somebody told me that there's a film about loosely kind of. I haven't seen it. It's on Amazon. I'm going to check it out. Why? I mean, I wanted to. You know, I mean, it's just so insanely horrific to me, and haunting to me. I mean, you know, I've read a lot about it. I think I kind of obsessed over the act, and it just became something that I wanted to address and make a film about. And you know, I'm also I mean, there's so many layers to it. There's the you know, kind of just incessant sexual violence, just the layers and layers and layers of violence and gender violence, female infanticide, female feticide. You know, it was just something that was discussed and talked about in my house as I was growing up. It was just in the layers of the way that, especially the women talked, you know, whether it was their own personal experiences or, you know, just talking about either as a child, within their families, their elders, their own children. And it was, you know, also personal to me. I remember, you know, when my mom decided to have another child, you know, she was given the pills to, you know, it's just lots of people are giving them to have a boy. And I know, you know, she was really upset about that, but that was just a normal thing. That was like nothing. And, you know, we're a family of mostly girls. My grandmother had 3 daughters. And, you know, when my mom was a little girl, she was actually dressed as a boy. Her name is Shashi, which is normally a boy's name. And I think there was, you know, obviously an expectation for my grandmother to have a boy. And I remember when my mom told me when my Masi was born, it was, you know, of course everybody loved her and adored her as a child, but there was definitely this sadness and burden. And it was like, oh, again, you haven't had a boy. And, you know, it's interesting because, you know, you think that so many things have evolved and shifted and changed, but they haven't. They haven't. And even with, you know, these really incredible conversations around, you know, gender being a social construct, gender non-binary. I mean, so many, you know, I'm so fortunate to be part of a community of people who are just really, you know, claiming and owning their gender, or, you know, choosing not to have gender labels. And even within that conversation, you know, there's still, you know, still culturally and all over the world, just the insane discrimination and violence against girls is just gutting and heartbreaking. And I think, you know, it's just something that I deeply care about. And young girls and women are almost always front and center in my stories. And you know, the thing is, it's like, it's complicated because, you know, you can say like, oh, things are progressive, but it's like, I actually feel like with what I'm seeing, the violence is more than before. I mean, the reports of acid attacks, of rape, of a lot of caste-based violence. Like I feel like it feels like the numbers are even higher than before. I don't know if that's your experience. That's what I feel like I'm seeing in the reports from organizations that work specifically on the ground. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's still so many conversations that are needed to be done. Like, we feel like things are getting better, things are improving. There's also, I think that a lot more people are coming out as well. Like, we're hearing a lot more rape cases than ever, especially in India. Like, I mean, after the 2012 case, sorry, there's so much more of it coming to light. And I think it's because maybe there's a slight disconnect, I feel, with rural areas especially, and then you've got places like Mumbai in India which are completely different to the rural places. So there's that type of disconnect in kind of viewing how violence is against women, but there's definitely just so much to explore and just so much to look at and consider as well, which again isn't really, I think, dealt in the most sensitive way in film sometimes. So I think, again, seeing it from a filmmaker that is women and actually understands these gives us a more different, clear perspective, which I think we don't really get to see in many Hindi standard films, even though they might be done by independent filmmakers, for example. But I think the way like you've portrayed it is completely different. Just the little tiny details as well. I think what you put in the film, like I remember at the end of the film how we see Shivangi seeing the fetus and just this whole kind of parallel vision of things. I mean, I think there was a lot to that, the way you've portrayed the poetic imagery. So it's hard to say it was nice, but it meant a lot, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I remember a couple of, I think it was like 2 years ago, I read this article, and it was like an interview. Okay, it was an article about how there are more women filmmakers being supported, but the person that was interviewed was a male, like a man who was a filmmaker, and it was him talking about the importance of women filmmakers and how more of them are being supported. And it was like, okay, how, like, I just don't understand how this was published. Like, I mean, is this a joke, or is this just like so beta or whatever? You know, it's just kind of funny. And so that's what I've noticed, is that if there are issues that are talked about, addressed, explored, it is done through the male gaze. Or if there's something that's about rape or something about a woman who's abused, it's generally, and even if it's tried to be done sensitively, there's generally a man who's the hero, somebody who's like a cop or a reporter, you know, and the woman is in like a situation where she needs saving and she's a victim, and or, you know, the entire village is the culprit, and there's like one sad poor woman, and, you know, somebody comes in and they figure out the situation, and then at the end there's like a conversation that everybody has, and everything's wrapped up perfectly. I think that, you know, there's and I'm not saying that men can't make films like that, but having, you know, half the population, if you don't have enough, you know, literature or book, you know, literature, music, film from other perspectives, then you're really getting a very singular perspective. And unfortunately, with the very few women filmmakers there are, the expectations of their work to address everything is very high. And there's just like this microscopic lens on their work where everything is just like taken apart. They don't have as many liberties to explore, and they don't have as many liberties to not make mistakes, but to try new things and to explore. And you know, you hear from people like, I wish more people were trying new things. I wish there was this, I wish there was that. But then when you see people doing that, there's such a resistance to it because, you know, in a way it kind of rocks their world where they're in a system that benefits them. Systems that where there's power that benefits them. And I see this time and time again, you know, I mean, especially with Punjabi cinema. I mean, it's, you know, Punjabi cinema, and I, you know, I'm just so dedicated. Okay, and then, you know, we can talk about Indian cinema, like Indian cinema that's just, you know, people say Indian cinema outside of India, but India is just so vast, so nuanced. You know, we are not a monolithic culture at all. Of course, we share things and we have pride and we care about each other, and there's, you know, there's definitely a sense of unity, but in other ways, and I think in beautiful ways that I'm interested in, you know, Bengali cinema is very different than cinema, Malayalam cinema is different than, and the thing with Punjabi cinema, there's just such a wealth of history and stories. And, you know, I only have one short lifetime of what I can do, but I want those stories. And I mean, where are stories just from the partition alone? Where are diaspora stories? Where are the stories where our families, you know, went to Kenya? And where are the stories now? And what about those villages now where they're like ghost villages because so many young people have left? You know, I want the nuance. And you know, we have a rich lineage of poetry and music and art and folklore, and I want all of that as a viewer. Like, where is it?
Yeah,
And I know that it's there. It's like those filmmakers have to be supported. So, you know, I'm trying to find ways to do whatever I can to find those voices and support them and encourage them.
I agree. There is so many stories in Punjab, just literally waiting at every corner. But I also think we have so much literature as well, like these great writers, great poets. I don't understand why filmmakers aren't turning to them, using their stories. I think only Gurvinder Singh has done that recently, and his 2 short films have been amazing. And what's the common theme? They're based on stories by actual writers.
Yeah.
So I feel maybe this is just an observation that I've made, but I feel like Punjabi filmmakers need to reconnect with the literature. They're not really connecting to actual Punjabi literature, actual Punjabi history.
We have master writers.
Yeah, we do.
We have master writers, whether that's short stories or prose, or even, you know, there's so many ways that we can take that work and adapt it. And if you look at cinema from around the world, like, for example, just take, for example, like Oscar films. Almost all of those films are adaptations. Like, they're, you know, like, even, for example, everybody's watching Queen's Gambit right now. That's an adaptation from a book from like the early 80s. That book people have been trying to adapt that book for a long time. That's an adaptation, and there is something really powerful about really good literature and adapting it. But Yeah, I don't know why more Punjabi filmmakers don't just adapt like a good short film, like
Yeah.
like a short story. Oh my gosh, yes. And I don't know what that disconnect is.
Mm.
I don't know what that. I mean, it would be great. Like, let's make a collective or something of like 4 or 5 filmmakers who are adapting Punjabi shorts. And I myself I read a lot, and so I look for stories. But yeah, I don't understand it. There's some sort of piece
There
that's
is,
missing.
yeah.
I think,
I don't,
yeah. I think me and Rupinder, we always literally talk about this, about, how there was a period in Punjabi cinema where there was actually some good content, and how there's a lot of commercial sort of films going on. And we're always having that debate of why that has happened, because, we come from a land of, great thinkers, poets, literature, etc. We're always having that debate, whether it was to do with, a lot of people going abroad, whether it was to do with 84, or whether it was to do with something else. We're always constantly having that debate. But I think the next question really ties well into about Punjabi stories in general. Um, it's something that me and Rupinder have noticed a lot, that Indian critics in general, they really kind of misunderstand Punjabi stories. Do you feel the same? And if yes, why? Why do you feel like they may misunderstand the story? Because if I take Kali Kohi as an example, one of the reviews that I had read was they were kind of questioning Darshan's character. They were like, why is he really adamant of wanting to say the Pind? Why is he acting very like, patriarchy? Why is he being really like weird and all of a sudden, being mean? Why is he acting in that? Why does he have that behavior? And I feel like me and Rupinder really understood it straight away, because we're Punjabis, of course, and we've come from that background of understanding, and we've seen it in our own families or people that we know, that there are men like that in the Punjabi community who are very like, mama's boy, or very adamant, very patriarchy. And it it just felt really strange how when I read that review, they did not understand that character. And I watched so many films from different cultures, and even if I don't understand their culture, I understand, that emotion ties you so well, even if it's from a different community. But here, like, the critic didn't understand, something that we could all relate to. Doesn't mean you have to be Punjabi. But do you feel the same? Do you feel like a lot of critics kind of misunderstand Punjab stories?
Um, I really try hard not to focus on critics because they're all different. And I think that I think if you're a film critic, for example, like I was a film programmer for many years, and what I was interested in and what we were interested in as a team of programmers, whatever festival I worked at, we were interested in new voices and new discovery and what was something different that somebody was doing. We were not so interested in trying to understand everything. Like, it didn't matter if everything made sense to us or not, because you don't watch films I don't watch films to understand every single thing. And if something doesn't make sense to me, if it's done well and it's crafted well, then I kind of let it be. But that's the kind of cinema that I like. I like kind of interesting, odd things that I understand. I watch a lot of films from a lot of places, and I like cultural nuance. And I don't need to understand everything. I think that, so maybe that's one thing. I also think that, this probably happens a lot of places. I think that who gets to become a critic, just like who gets to become a filmmaker, is from a very specific space. It's a space of privilege, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that it's a responsibility. Like, I know that regardless of how I was brought up, you know, if there were any sort of things that I didn't have as a privilege, just the fact that I am able to now make films, write, and have this life is a privilege, because there are, you know, we're talking about who gets to tell stories. There are so many people who are phenomenal storytellers, who would be, you know, the masters and the auteurs, but those are young people and even elders who society would never allow. Like, they would literally have an uphill battle. They would basically be told, who do you think you are? You are not allowed to be a filmmaker, you know, or a storyteller. And critics are critics, and, you know, in their own way, they're going to focus on whatever they're going to focus on. That's, you know, from their agenda, their perspective, their takeaway of the film. It's like, you know, art is like that. You're gonna, and I love art criticism. Like, I like, you know, myself to take a film apart and think about characters and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, if we think about how, for the most part, Indian cinema is pretty city specific and very Hindi specific, and a lot of filmmakers are working in Mumbai. Maybe it comes from that. I mean, and yeah, I mean, that's an interesting thing about Darshan, because I feel like his character is so many people that I know, especially in Punjab. You know, but I think it speaks to the fact that we, again, are not a monolithic culture, and I think that's really important outside in the diaspora to understand that too. You know, like, Indians are not just Indians. Pakistanis are not just, you know, and it's like, I mean, Punjab, to me, that's why I call myself a Punjabi filmmaker. It's so specific, and that's the lens that I'm interested in. That's the lens that I'm looking at things from, and, you know, that's just the core of who I am as a person. So yeah, perhaps there is a misunderstanding. You know, there was a critic who said, why is the village so dark? I was like, well, it's not a documentary, first of all, and second of all, sometimes villages are dark, you know.
Yeah,
I think that sometimes, like, you know, sometimes I wonder, I'm like, why are you asking that question? Like, it's a film, it's a story, it's fictional.
I think people are just used to seeing this romanticized version of Punjab, or, you know, just seeing how it looks all pretty with the mustard fields in Bollywood and Punjabi films.
Yeah.
They're not used to this actual reality, which is pretty normal in almost every village in Punjab.
Yes, I mean, I've had people say, why does the family have a buffalo? And I'm like, okay.
No way.
Like, do you really want me to? No, I'm serious. It's like,
Wow.
I mean, you know, and also I really think that, because the film doesn't have, I mean, even with Sanjita, who is so stunningly gorgeous, I mean, we had so much fun, but, like, my costume designer, wardrobe, they made these beautiful outfits for her. And, you know, I was very specific, like, you know, don't do your brows, like, keep them natural. Like, I don't want a lot of makeup. I want you to wear, like, these very specific colors. Like, we just, you know, we built out all the characters, but I think because she's not getting married, she's not sexualized, there's no sex, there's no guns, there's no superhero, there's no, like, you know, male eject. Like, I just think all those things, like, they I think they throw people even if it's subconscious, but that's what I
Yeah.
want. You know, it would be insincere if I was to put in all of those things, and that's fine. If people want those films and they want to make those films, there's certainly a place for that, and that's great. I mean, I love good Bollywood films. I love song and dance. I grew up with that stuff. I grew up with it. I mean, I love all the golden classics, you know, that's like
Yeah.
my happy place. I still listen to that music all the time. I like put that music on the weekends and cook. That's what my mother did. You know, it's just like tradition.
Well, I think we could just go on and on talking about art and films. Our conversations are never going to end. But thank you so much, Terrie, for sharing your wisdom and thoughts. It's been just amazing just to listen to you and hear the detail and in your experience. And we've come to an end. So thank you, everyone, for listening. And thank you once again, Terrie, for joining us.
Yeah, you're welcome. And it's wonderful to hear all of your stories and thoughts as well. Thanks for having me. This is a nice conversation.